Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. On the show, we will be talking a little bit about the Supreme Court delivering a big blow, another big blow, to the Voting Rights Act in the kind of continued myth-shattering of the fact that, this Supreme Court may not be as right-wing as we thought it would be. Nope, it is just that bad. Already coming off a week last week where they pretty much legalized child slavery by big corporations. Also, a new profile in Business Insider is detailing a lot of the craziness of Senator Krysten Sinema's office life. And really, it's not that fun to work for the senator. We will give you the details when it comes to that. And also, the legend Intercept writer Jon Schwarz has a great new obituary up for a recent war criminal that passed away. A war criminal that passed away recently. His name being Donald Rumsfeld. So we're going to remember him with the help of the wonderful, talented Jon Schwarz there. So we're going to get through that here today. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. This is Newsflash. Oh, by the way, also we're talking about the biggest heat wave in modern history, according to scientists, right off the top. So we'll start with that. We couldn't forget. Anyway, so yeah, we start off again with this big heat wave here. A pair of climate scientists on Thursday said that the heat wave that has ravaged the Northwest and U.S. and Western Canada over the past week, killing literally hundreds. We talk about, the pretty horrific Miami housing collapse, which was definitely much more. Well, this is obviously a man-made disaster in and of itself, but with the Miami housing collapse, it was really a lot more covered on the news. But like 100 more people died just through the course of this heat wave. The fires that were started, people not having access to proper heating, and of course, I don't mean to put one over the other in terms of tragedy or make one seem worse than the other, because both are kind of really tragic losses of life. But it is really kind of insane how still this is not getting any kind of pickup. Like people have just accepted as part of American life that, yeah, climate change is coming, but I can just kind of put it out of my mind because it isn't at my front door yet. But I think what people really don't realize is it is going to be at your front door sooner rather than later, and you're probably not going to see it coming. Like, you are not going to see it coming, and the response from the government, I think, is going to be a lot like Donald Trump's coronavirus response. He's going to let people really die, going to hang them out to dry. And in terms of policy, in terms of government policy, I don't see, no matter who gets in there, it's hard to imagine how it's going to be any different, because we're seeing such dramatic changes, extreme weather coming in further, faster, stronger, and it is really something disturbing to watch. So this is Common Dreams. Jake Johnson here. A pair of climate scientists on Thursday said the heat wave that has ravaged the northwestern U.S. and western Canada over the past week, killing again hundreds and sparking dozens of wildfires, represents the world's most extreme heat wave in modern history. Never in the century plus of world weather observations. So this has been going on for a century plus. People have been taking data on the way weather has performed over various years, like what's been happening, what are the trends. So, I mean, there's a pretty good database of this stuff. So he says, never in the century-plus history of world weather observation have so many of the all-time heat records fallen by such a large margin in the past week's historic heat wave in Western North America. And we keep seeing all these records falling. Oh, it's the hottest year this year. It's the hottest year another year. Like, we keep seeing it, and over the time we become numb to it because there's no government and broader cultural action to address any of what's going on. Bob Henson, meteorologist for NOAA, N-O-A-A, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and hurricane scientist Jeff Masters wrote for Yale Climate Connections. It's not hype or exaggeration to call the past week's heat wave the most extreme in world weather records. The only heat wave that compares to it is the Great Dust Bowl heat wave of July 1936 in the U.S. Midwest and South Central Canada. But even that cannot compare to what happened in the Northwest U.S. and Western Canada over the past week. In British Columbia, the chief coroner said her office had received nearly 500 reports of sudden and unexpected deaths. 500 reports in Canada alone. I think the number's been 200-300 that I've heard. I'm sure that's out of date at this point in the U.S. Residents in the small BC village of Lytton, which on Tuesday recorded Canada's all-time high temperature of 121 degrees Fahrenheit in Canada. 121 degrees Fahrenheit, forced to evacuate Wednesday as a wildfire ripped through the area and quickly engulfed the small town, destroying homes and buildings. It is just absolutely insane. Lytton has been just picture an entire, especially if you're out there, you may be listening in a smaller town. Think about what would happen if you just got completely wiped out. Every single building, the school, just everything, hospital, restaurant, Main Street, that whole deal. Whatever small community your town may have in today's world, it just being completely wiped out by a wildfire in 121 degree heat. Just insane. So our poor little town of Lytton is gone, said Edith Loring Kuhenga, a administrator at a local school, wrote on Facebook. Our community members have lost everything. Really, really scary stuff. To break a national heat record by more than 8 degrees Fahrenheit over 3 days, words fail. That's Bob Henson there on Twitter. Henson and Masters called Lytton's, which 91% of which was burned, the poster community of this horrific heat wave. Weather historian Christopher Burt told the two scientists that this is the most anomalous regional extreme heat event to occur anywhere on Earth since temperature records can begin. Nothing can compare. Daniel Swain, who's another meteorologist, said that, quote, I've watched a lot of wildfire-associated pyroconvective events during the satellite area, but I think this might be the singular most extreme I've ever seen. This is a literal firestorm producing thousands of lightning strikes and almost certainly countless new fires. Really just an incredible video tweeted out here by Dakota Smith, who is at Weather Dak on Twitter. And you can kind of see it from kind of the satellite point of how these just new fires erupted up. Yeah, and you can see the plumes beginning on the satellite video. It's kind of a GIF there. Pyrocumulonimbus clouds that are being formed. So formed from fire there. That's the pyro part of it, obviously. But to emphasize the extremity of this event, Henson and Masters highlighted just some of the temperature records that have fallen in Canada and the United States over the past week. This is from Portland, Oregon. They broke their long-standing all-time record high of 107 degrees from 1965 and 1981 on 3 days in a row. 3 days in a row! A stunning feat for any all-time record with highs of 108 and 112 on Saturday and Sunday and 116 on Monday. That's 1 degree higher than the average daily high on June 28th at Death Valley in California. In Kiyute, Washington, it broke its official all-time high by a truly astonishing 11 degrees Fahrenheit after hitting 110 degrees Fahrenheit on Monday. The old record there was 99 degrees from 1981. Kiyute is located near the lush Hoh rainforest on the Olympic Peninsula, just 3 miles from the Pacific Ocean, and receives an average of 100 inches of precipitation a year. So the fact that temperatures have already moved so high that far north, only very, very worrying sign. So Jasper, Alberta, broke its all-time high of 98.1 degrees Fahrenheit on 4 days in a row, which is even more unprecedented, obviously, there, on June 27th through the 30th, with highs of 99.1, 102.2, 104.5, and 106 degrees Fahrenheit. So just insane stuff. So all-time state highs were tied in Washington with 118 degrees Fahrenheit at Dallasport, 118 in Oregon at Hermiston, beating the reliable record of 107 degrees Fahrenheit. 17 degrees Fahrenheit, and provincial highs were smashed in British Columbia. They got up to 121 degrees there, again, at light, and just still can't believe that. And the Northwest Territories at 103.8 at Fort Smith, beating the old 89.1. So yeah, these are pretty far up north. Like if you pull up like Northwest Territories on a map and see where that is, and like look just like on a basic level, on a supposed geographic level, the fact that that place is getting temperatures in the hundreds is just horrifying. No other way to put it. So preliminary data from NOAA's U.S. Records website show that 55 U.S. stations have the highest temperatures in their history in the week ending on June 28th. More than 400 daily record highs were set over the past year. The nation experienced about 38,000 daily record highs versus 18,500 record lows, consistent with the 2-to-1 ratio of hot to cold records set in recent years. Scientists have long predicted that heat waves of the kind are the scorching heat waves of the kind scorching the northwestern U.S. and Canada will become more frequent and intense across the globe as the planet continues to warm due to continued emission of heat-trapping greenhouse gases. Nowhere is safe. Who could have predicted a temperature of 48 to 49 degrees Celsius, that's 118 to 120 degrees in British Columbia, says Sir David King, former chief scientific advisor in the United Kingdom, said in an interview with The Guardian. The risks have been understood for so long, and we have not acted. So now we have a narrow timeline for us to manage the problem. So couldn't say it better myself there. That is a complete, like, the timeline, like, the facts of the case, they are as simple as they've ever been. They are the same as they've ever been. We are facing a climate crisis. The timeline, there's some back and forth about it, but the point is, it is very, very narrow and narrowing by the day. The more we see these kind of events, the more we see this kind of, like, horrific heat, we will continue to know that we are in a worse and worse place. All right, so we are now going to continue on to our next story, and we're going to talk about the Supreme Court, another big threat to our civilization. The Supreme Court's is again from Common Dreams. Brett Wilkins here. The U.S. Supreme Court's conservative majority on Thursday further empowered moneyed interests to manipulate elections through untraceable campaign contributions, dark money, by ruling in favor of two right-wing nonprofit groups who argued that California's donor disclosure requirements violated their First Amendment rights. So just pretty much saying that California is just doing, through their own state law, suing, taking it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and, of course, going on the precedent of Citizens United, which said money equals speech when it comes to the First Amendment. The Thomas More Law Center, a Christian legal advocacy group, and Americans for Prosperity, of course, a Koch-funded group, challenge a California requirement that nonprofits identify their contributions in their state tax filings. So they have to do it to the FCC, the federal arm of it, but they of election regulation, but they will have to do it through their taxes. The groups asserted that forcing such disclosures restricted their freedom of association. Obviously, just on a non-legal level, it just shows you the complete cowardice that they have, and the fact that they are not at all focused on, they're not proud of who they know that if they do, they show themselves, they show this association freely, I mean, they're going to get the blowback for it, because it's all going to be funded by big, mega donors, billionaires, all that, you know the drill. So writing for the court's conservative majority in Americans for Prosperity Foundation versus Bonta, Chief Justice John Roberts ruled that California's blanket demand for disclosure is facially unconstitutional. Again, so now that himself, John Roberts, has made that determination back in whatever, I think it was like 2011, that money equals speech. It is unconstitutional if you're apparently, if you're kind of holding to that ridiculous standard. But even though disclosure is that's all they're asking for. They're not like limiting it at all. It's just like all they're asking for is disclosure. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And it really, the way to view this court is not that, it's, super, well, it is super conservative, but not to say that it is, one direction or the other. The biggest role of it is keeping the status quo while doing as much kind of low-profile giveaways to big business as possible. And that is a big, big giveaway to big business. They're not on the kind of more hot-button issues like, abortion, Obamacare, things like that. They kind of know that, a lot of the corporate orthodoxy is in place. Corporations, big businesses, the people who really put these justices, like pretty much all six of them, if they're all, I think, Federalist Society associated on the Supreme Court, they don't really care about abortion. They know that Obamacare is secured, and reaffirming Obamacare is actually a big victory for them, because Obamacare is pretty much a private health insurance company giveaway, and it will continue to be that way as long as it is upheld. That's why, I think, and a lot of Americans think we could do a lot better than Obamacare. But those are, again, things that are broadly designed to appease and appeal liberals, to make them say, oh, maybe that Supreme Court is not going to be such a big deal after all. Let's not, for example, add more justices, do court reform, ending the life terms, for example. And what happens there is an incentive for moderation, for saying, oh, let's not rock the boat too much. But at the same time, major rulings just 2 weeks ago, or last week, that one of them legalized child slavery, the other legalized fraud from Goldman Sachs, pretty much saying that it was totally okay, totally fine, and that they should not be sued in class action lawsuit, Goldman should be, for pretty much profiting off of selling these bad securities to institutional investors, for example, like the Arkansas Teacher Retirement Fund, that they knew were bad, and were also profiting off of their failure. So think about that for a second. They were profiting off failure of bad securities they were selling. They knew they were bad. They bet on them to fail, and they were trying to hawk them to as many people as they could possibly. That is what they did there, and that is what is now going completely unpunished by forces for business, forces for capital on the Supreme Court. So, and now of course we have this. So it is quite an interesting situation here. When it comes to freedom of association, the protections of the First Amendment are triggered not only by actual restrictions on an individual's ability to join with others to further shared goals. The risk of a chilling effect on association is enough. So, I think that none of this to me is restricting anyone's ability to associate. The real importance there is sparing the embarrassment, sparing the headache if they found out that Americans for Prosperity and other groups were associated. So that's what they're trying to stop. Nonprofits were supported by an unusual array of groups, including the ACLU, the Libertarian Cato Institute, the LGBTQ Advocacy Group, Human Rights Campaign, and the Right-Wing Institute for Justice, as well as the NAACP. So those are the people challenging these challenging the Americans for Prosperity. These are the two nonprofit groups there, but I cannot entirely tell if the ACLU was supporting it. It's a little unclearly written. Liberal Justices Sonia Sotomayor, Stephen Breyer, and Elena Kagan dissented, writing, today's analysis marks reporting and disclosure requirements with a bullseye. Regulated entities who wish to avoid their obligations can do so by vaguely waving towards First Amendment privacy concerns, including those relating to elections and campaign finance. The idea here is the precedent is that further they can use this, big companies, big businesses can use this for all disclosure requirements, making that as kind of an assault on their privacy, an assault on their First Amendment rights, and that could find future purchase in court. So all the things that businesses have to disclose for various reasons, not just for political actions, but things, who they're paying, why they're paying them, all that kind of stuff. That now may be even under threat. Those disclosure regulations now may be even under threat. So, Sotomayor also calling out the conservative majority for jettisoning precedent, saying that today's court apparently has a different view of its role, one that is wholly inconsistent with the court's precedents and our court's long-held view on this issue. So some observers asserted the Thursday Supreme Court ruling was the latest in a chain of decisions favoring moneyed interest at the expense of democracy in the name of the First Amendment. So in Citizens United v. the FEC, the court affirmed that money in the form of unlimited campaign donations is free speech, and in Americans for Prosperity versus Bonta, the justices ruled that dark money is free association. As Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington President Noah Bookbinder noted Thursday that even in Citizens United, the Supreme Court said all money in politics was okay because it would all be disclosed. And now they're saying that even the act of disclosure violates freedom of association, violates the First Amendment, and really just moving the goalpost tighter and tighter and tighter in terms of having any sort of transparency about the transparency about the corruption going on in our government is under threat. So now making it easier for big money to seep into anything, and now making it so when you see something happening in the political sphere, it's a legitimate question to ask: who is funding it? And it may be actually very, very tough to find an answer because you just won't know. You won't have a conclusive source of proof because the disclosure limits are going to be so low. Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut weighed in on the ruling, tweeting that if Citizens United opened the floodgates to corrupting political spending, this decision breaks the levees. Today's decision further entrenches dark money is hold on our political system and policy making by dismissing decades of legal precedent, not to mention basic common sense. So a pretty big turn away from President here, building up much more of the Citizens United than decades and decades of past precedent when it comes to disclosure and what qualifies free association and what doesn't. Roll call reports that Democratic lawmakers argued in a brief led by Representative Sheldon Whitehouse that the ruling shields billionaires, fossil fuel corporations, and other wealthy interests seeking to conceal their secret spending, saying, quote, "We are now on a clear path to enshrining a constitutional right to anonymous spending in our democracy and securing an upper hand for dark money influence in perpetuity." So Whitehouse was also among several Democratic lawmakers who had urged Justices Amy Coney Barrett to recuse herself in the case, as AFP had run a major advertising campaign in support of her confirmation last year. So pretty much this is AFP, FedSoc. They're all Federalist Society, of course, being the big dark money group that helps to fund right-wing justices like Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Roberts, Alito. Am I forgetting Amy Coney Barrett, John Roberts? Literally all of them are put together by the same project, and a huge effort for decades by the court, by conservatives to put these people on the court and make sure that these dark money groups can do all the things that they wanted to do, making life easier for the people that put them in that place. And so it is definitely a conflict of interest, and one that is just being completely ignored here by these justices, because they can, and they're in a politically super rock solid, unassailable position, which leaves them free to do whatever they want. So from Andrew Perez, he had a scoop that said dark money spending groups that spent millions to confirm Trump's Supreme Court picks and SCOTUS fights were funded by a $14.25 million mystery donor, and now has a fictitious name for a seven-figure anti-critical race theory ad campaign. So this is the same dark money donor from the Concord Fund who is spending money on Supreme Court picks, funding a $14.25 million, funding $14.25 million into this new anti-critical race theory ad campaign, which is very suspicious, shall we say. Dark money spending at the federal level tops $1 billion in the 2020 election cycle, which Transparency Advocates Open Secrets called a massive sum driven by the explosion of secret donations boosting Democrats. The billion-dollar sum includes a whopping $600 million in donations from opaque political nonprofits and shell companies to outside groups. In 2020, dark money groups preferred to bankroll closely tied super PACs rather than spend the money themselves. Politically active nonprofits do not disclose their donors, reported roughly $88 million in direct election spending to the FEC. The remainder of that total is made up of spending on issue ads targeting candidates online and on the airwaves, which are quote-unquote issue ads. So a big blow further to voting rights, not just through political spending and dark money came from the same 6 Supreme Court justices dealing with voting rights by upholding voter suppression policies in Arizona, fueling calls by Democratic lawmakers and progressive advocacy groups for congressional action to pass not only the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, but also the Judiciary Act of 2021, which would increase the number of high court justices from 9 to 13. So these decisions today not only further underscore the need for Congress to act to preserve democracy by ensuring that every eligible American is able to freely exercise their fundamental right to vote and that no billionaires are able to buy elections. So Chuck Schumer, again, pretty much not really committing to too much being based on his entire political career there, but he called this ruling, quote, jaw-dropping. So we'll see about that, Chuck. Well, I would like to see a little bit more action from you before you can run around complaining about how bad all of this is. But yeah, just another big blow. And I think the important thing to realize is the Supreme Court is not in place to, for example, hand Donald Trump the election in one that he clearly lost. But the reason why a 6-3 Supreme Court majority is so important is because they will always be there to make sure that no matter how unpopular, no matter how many times they lose the popular vote, that conservatives will have both the moneyed interest support and the undisclosed now moneyed interest support and the grip on our democracy to win many, if not all, the elections in the future. That, folks, is what it's really about. All right, we're going to talk about Krysten Sinema next. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the Spencer Walsh Radio Network. I want to tell you a little bit about our lineup for this summer. We start off with Newsflash, all new, of course, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You can't miss it. It's our flagship show to get caught up on everything happening in the world around you. But stick around for some history and some entertainment. Learn about all the things you never learned in history class every Thursday with Hidden History. And get ready for a fun night out or turn your living room into the club with uncultured live mixes every Saturday all summer long. The Spencer Walsh Radio Network is your home for summer sounds coming all season long. Every podcast is available everywhere, so you have no excuse not to listen. All right, so not really too much of a great story here to report about, but it is interesting to see what people are and kind of get a better sense of the Krysten Sinema. I'm just calling her Krysten Sinema. Who cares? The Krysten Sinema psyche. What it is like to work for Krysten in her office, and get a sense of one of the people who is probably playing the biggest role in being a moderate in holding up Arizona voting rights, which is kind of funny because back as early as like 2010, there's clips of her saying, "Oh, reconciliation is a great thing." Republicans, they only had in between 50 and 60 votes for quite a long time from like the 90s to 2008, and they were able to get a lot of stuff done. So why shouldn't we use our power to get stuff done in the Senate? And she was like a kind of Green Party style radical anti-war person in the 2000s, very strongly opposed the Iraq War. Then she got into politics, went hard right, and hasn't really looked back since, and now is one of the most kind of obnoxious defenders of the filibuster. Of course, doing that memorable thumbs down vote for the minimum wage that was definitely played back a lot in her constituency of Arizona, brought as a broader campaign tactic by some people on the left. I don't know how much of an effect that had. I do believe there are some recent poll numbers out that said she was doing slightly worse than Mark Kelly, although. And funnily enough, a lot of her favorability came from Republicans, not from Democrats, way higher than Mark Kelly's did. Mark Kelly had higher numbers than her, but a lot more of that was actually from Democratic voters. And the thing with that is a lot of those Republicans are not going to stick with you when they're comparing you to an actual Republican come time to vote, at the ballot box. So it could be a little bit of a problem from her down the road. But it seems like, according to this new Business Insider profile, she is one of those, shall we say, Amy Klobuchar types. She's not that fun to work with. And the story is behind a paywall, unfortunately. But we do have a thread here from Robin Brevender, the policy correspondent at the Business Insider, writing, the deduct of 7 former staffers and interns, most of whom wanted to remain anonymous. One former intern said she fielded constant angry phone calls from Sinema's constituents and got reprimanded by a senior staffer when she went off script, and that staffer later threatened to derail her next internship offer. The intern emailed an advisor to offer advice. So pretty much like picture this. It's like right after the minimum wage vote or something like that. She's getting hammered with calls. People saying like, "Oh, why don't you vote on this? Why don't you like?" It is good to see that people are constantly calling her angrily, and she, aired from the party line, whatever that was. And I'd love to know the issue that it was. It would really be fascinating to see what it was, what the script was, and all that stuff. But that doesn't seem to be in here. But apparently, this intern, who I believe was like a high school age intern, had to email her advisor. Poor girl. That does suck. It's probably the worst job I've ever had in my entire life, said another former Sinema staffer. It ruined my aspirations in politics. And if you're working for Krysten Sinema, I mean, I'm sorry, you're probably not choosing the best place to start if you want to have, high aspirations. Like good things can be done in politics, and we can make change for the better. Where in Krysten Sinema's office, literally the place where change goes to die. Junior Capitol Hill staffers have been known to work long hours for little pay to try and bolster their resumes and political careers, but lower-level staffers told us that Sinema's office is tough even by Capitol Hill standards. Sinema's office told us it's incredibly common for there to be turnover among junior staff in Capitol Hill offices due to early career changes. There's been almost no turnover at all among senior staff since Sinema's first term started in the Senate in 2019, they said. So that's kind of a fair defense there, pretty much saying that, yeah, well, we treat our interns like crap, but our inner circle is strong. But so that just seems to be mostly what they're like, but really just a kind of fascinating person. And I would be interested to see more details about this. So, interns told Business Insider they work long hours for little pay, deal with angry callers who question their senator's loyalty to Joe Biden, and live in fear they'll be fired if they make mistakes or deviate from the call scripts. It's probably the worst job I've ever had in my life, again, and kind of ruined my aspirations in politics. One intern cried after a disagreement with one top aide. I'm afraid to answer the phone calls or mess up in any way for fear of my punishment, an intern wrote to her school's internship advisor. So, not really cool. Comparatively. So yeah, it does seem that she's kind of no fun to work with, but it also does seem to be that she's feeling the pressure from some angry constituents, and just not from quote unquote not being loyal enough to the Biden agenda. And the Biden agenda is one thing. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but to my mind, it is much better than whatever Krysten Sinema wants to do, which to my mind so far is literally nothing. So I'll take it. All right. Let's move on now to our last story of the day, and it's from Jon Schwarz in The Intercept. A great one. As always, he is out with a new piece remembering Donald Rumsfeld, the Bush aide who passed away, I believe 2 or 3 days ago. So sums up pretty well here. Rumsfeld managed to do terrible things throughout his life while remaining tremendously banal. He didn't have the stupidity of Bush or the straight up evilness of someone like Dick Cheney, but boy was he all there. He was, I would say, in terms of the all deep state team in America, I would compare him to, like, I don't know, Chris Paul, in the NBA today. Like, he's been around a while. He's played some quality minutes, but he doesn't make too much splash. He's in the State Farm commercials. That's just about it. All right. This is from Jon Schwarz. He writes, at 2:40 p.m. on September 11, 2001, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld issued orders to one of his underlings. Among Rumsfeld's thoughts, best info fast, good enough, judge weather good enough, hit SH at same time, Saddam Hussein there, not only UBL, and near-term target needs, go massive, sweep it all up, things related and not. So, yeah, that is maybe a little bit hard for you to understand there, to Rumsfeld's kind of thoughts to his aides, but John breaks it down. That is, less than 6 hours after the first plane hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center, Rumsfeld was anxious to, quote, hit Saddam Hussein at the same time. He wanted to kill two birds with one stone and take out Saddam Hussein, which had been a long, long goal for neoconservatives like himself in the Republican Party, who have been really, really pushing for a long time to take this out, demonizing Saddam Hussein through sanctions in the Clinton era, and just going, pushing for that inevitable result, which would eventually come. And it looks like they were prepared literally on that day, just 6 hours after, to make Saddam the scapegoat, even though they knew it looked like, UBL, Osama bin Laden. And he wasn't especially concerned about whether Iraq or any target was responsible for the attacks. He wanted to conduct a, quote, massive attack on targets related and not. That emphasis was in the original message. That is, he saw the deaths of thousands of Americans as a wonderful opportunity to do whatever the George W. Bush administration and neocons for decades wanted to do, to continue the overarching reach of the military-industrial complex and American empire. At that moment, Rumsfeld was doing what he did best throughout his life, spinning the unspeakable suffering of others to the desired ends of himself and his political allies. Rumsfeld was born in Chicago in 1932 and grew up in the affluent suburbs in the north of the city. After graduating from Princeton, he served in the Navy for several years, and by the time he was 30 years old, he was elected to Congress from Illinois. President Richard Nixon can be heard saying on his Oval Office tapes that, and in an admiration, by the way, that Rumsfeld is a ruthless little bastard. You can be sure of that. Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger later characterized Rumsfeld as formidable and a special Washington phenomenon, a skilled, full-time politician bureaucrat in whom ambition, ability, and substance fused seamlessly. Henry Kissinger, by the way, in terms of evil, no slouch himself. Stay tuned on Hidden History for more on that. Rumsfeld survived Watergate to serve in the next administration as President Gerald Ford's chief of staff, with Dick Cheney as his deputy. Then, at age 40, he very tactically, by the way, survived Watergate to serve as Gerald Ford's staff with Dick Cheney as his deputy. Then, at age 43, he was named Secretary of Defense for the first time. One of Rumsfeld's most notable actions was participation in the creation of and promotion of Team B, a special CIA project to challenge the agency's estimates of Soviet strength. So pretty much a kind of coalition inside the national security state to hype up the threat of Soviet nuclear weapons and Soviet capabilities. And a lot of that kind of same methodology was used later. We'll get into that. So he describes Team B as filled with hard-right ideologues. It predictably came to conclusions that were widely alarmist and largely fantasy. The Soviet economy was growing at a blistering pace, as were its weapon systems, and it was poised to strike the West at any moment. And even if it was growing at a blistering pace, it wasn't really. It didn't have that much of ambition to strike the West even in its first place. So Rumsfeld himself later said, one of the most significant events in my adult life has been the massive shift of power away from the United States to the Soviet Union. The intellectual integrity of Team B and its ethos can be judged by the fact the Soviet Union collapsed and disappeared right in the middle of his adult life in 1991. He was like 60 at that time. Was it? Wait, am I doing my math? 1932 to 1999. So, yeah, he was 60. So, not really his adult life. More towards the end of it. More of a senior citizen life. But the Soviet Union was collapsing pretty much throughout a lot of it. So instead of the shift away from power to the United States and Soviet Union, really the opposite was happening. But Rumsfeld and his friends, here's the key point, could make a lot of political hay and a lot of financial hay out, and a lot of career hay out of making the Soviet Union seem like the bigger threat. After Ford's 1976 defeat by Jimmy Carter, Rumsfeld spent most of the next 2.5 decades at the top level of corporate America, running various large corporations. He did, however, keep his hand in the U.S. foreign policy, most famously taking several trips with Baghdad to Baghdad to meet with Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein on behalf of the Reagan administration, even as as Iraq used chemical weapons during the Iran-Iraq War. How'd they come about those chemical weapons? So according to a declassified U.S. cable about one of the meetings, he said, Hussein showed obvious pleasure, and the session would prove to be of wider benefit to the United States posture in the region. Oh, yes, it would. Saddam also warned about that the invasion of Lebanon by Syria and Israel was dangerous because it meant others would be encouraged to attack and occupy weaker states. Chaos and instability would result. Notably, Rumsfeld's chummy visit took place after the crimes for which Saddam would later be convicted and executed. So that was the whole farce of the kind of American posturing, especially the posturing from people like Rumsfeld and the Bush, and all the same people in the Reagan years were big presence in Bush White House. That ideology and those A's were very, very, very much connected to a legacy of 30, 40 years of straight global warmongering and imperialism, and support of crimes from people like Saddam. Rumsfeld returned to the Defense Department with the election of President George W. Bush. With many of the Team B personnel back in power, it should have been expected that the case for war with Iraq would consist of similar delirious falsehoods, and it did. Rumsfeld himself lied in a particularly jarring way in a late 2002 interview. Quote, the only way Iraqis weapons of mass destruction will ever be found, in my view, effectively, is if you find people who have been involved in it and who are willing to come and talk to you about it and tell you who they are. The last time the inspectors were in, that's how it happened. The two sons of Saddam Hussein defected, went to Jordan. Sons-in-law of Saddam Hussein defected, went to Jordan, and word came out that they told where these inspectors could go look. They went and looked, and they found weapons of mass destruction. In reality, the two sons-in-law of Saddam did, in fact, defect to Jordan in 1995. Soon afterward, Iraq turned over a hidden cache of documents about its 1980s WMD programs that they used during the Iran-Iraq War, but no actual weapons, just a cache of documents. And one of the Iraqis, Hussein Kamel, who had run the programs for his father-in-law, specifically said to the United Nations, the CIA, and even on CNN, that Iraq no longer had any WMDs. This, of course, turned out to be completely true. Thus, the lesson of Rumsfeld's sale was the exact opposite of what he claimed. Iraq could successfully hide pieces of paper from inspectors, but that was about it. Later in Rumsfeld's memoir, Known and Unknown, he would claim that the U.S. was effectively right about the WMD issue. Still trying to have it both ways. Respectable. John Nixon, a CIA analyst who interrogated Saddam after he was captured, has said that he was motivated by the gibberish in books like Rumsfeld to write his own to set the record straight. Like, he saw and was, like, according to reports, legitimately baffled. Because he thought he was friends with the U.S. He thought he was friends with people like Rumsfeld because they came over and had chummy visits just like 10, 20 years ago. And here comes Rumsfeld and all these people in the United States kind of military establishment he thought he was in good with, now trying to turn the tables on to be like, Saddam has WMDs. And just because he says he doesn't, that means he does even more, because you guys weren't smart enough to find him. And if you don't find them, that's proof that he definitely has them, because he would have been trying so hard to hide them anyway. Like, that was some of the logic that was in display in the lead up to the Iraq War, and people bought it. Rumsfeld's record on other issues during the Bush years was much of the same. He approved a memo delineating which methods of torture of prisoners would be permissible, while asking why the military would only make them stand for 4 hours at a time, given that, quote, I stand for 8 to 10 hours a day. I mean, come on. Who's the real man understanding torture? Like this guy's up for 8 to 10 hours a day. Why doesn't he try Abu Ghraib? I'm sure he would like it, given that he's such a physical beast. But what a shame he can't try that anymore. Can't get a taste of his own medicine. In 2006, Rumsfeld privately praised Ayad Alawi, who had been interim prime minister of Iraq a few years before. Alawi, Rumsfeld said, had steel up his backside in terms of dealing with him. He was terrific. He could make a decision, and he would kick some fanny to get it implemented, and you feel good about it. Journalist Seymour Hersh had written that Alawi was a hitman for Saddam back in the 1970s, killing Iraqi defectors in Europe. The New Yorker had reported that there were persistent rumors that Alawi had personally executed 7 prisoners just before taking office in Iraq. So, in other words, exactly the kind of man that Rumsfeld would respect. Rumsfeld's downfall finally came when Republicans lost control of both the Senate and the House of Representatives in the 2006 midterms. Bush needed to appear as though he were making changes, and Rumsfeld was sacrificed. In retirement, though, he spent his time at, this is probably one of the most insane stories. To top it all off about the torture-loving, war-loving, bloodthirsty man that is Donald Rumsfeld, he spent his time at his antebellum vacation home on the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. It was literally nicknamed Mount Misery and had been owned by a specialist in breaking as humans disobedient slaves. Frederick Douglass was sent there at age 16 for punishment and later wrote, "I was completely wrecked, changed, and bewildered, goaded almost to madness." And now Rumsfeld is gone. In a statement, his family said, "History may remember him for his extraordinary accomplishments over 6 decades of public service, the integrity he brought to a life dedicated to his country." This is likely true for establishment history. For instance, almost none of these details about Rumsfeld appear in the obituary just published in the New York Times, but everyone else should remember who Rumsfeld truly was and the kind of person you need to be to reach the summit of American power. Literally living in a house as his vacation home in the Chesapeake Bay, where Frederick Douglass and other slaves were broken for disobedience. This is who this guy is. He is a monster of the highest order, one of the ultimate supervillains of American history, and it is a shame he never, ever got to experience the horror and suffering he visited on so many other people. That's all we have for you guys today. This has been Newsflash.